Good evening, Flint, and thank you for tuning in to another edition of Meet the Candidates. I'm your host, Keisha Hoey, and I'm coming to bring you this crazy election season. We just had the resignation of our former mayor, Don Williamson, so now we're going to replace him with six people who feel like they're qualified for the position. Also, this summer, the city council is looking to be reelected as well, so we have a tremendous show for you coming this summer. In the studio today, we have with us Dayne Walling. He was a former candidate for mayor, and we happen to have him in the studio.
Yeah, good evening. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Dayne. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you come from, and all that stuff?
Well, I'm born and raised right here in Flint. I grew up on the south side of Flint. I went to Freeman Elementary and then Whittier. I'm a proud graduate of Flint Central High School. I'm Indian.
Indians.
My parents were both public school teachers, so education was a really big part of my family growing up. Really valued education and feel a real great debt to the Flint schools and the great education that I had there. I'm now married. We have two sons. Our oldest, Bennett, is second grade, and he's at Pierce Elementary also. Our younger son's in preschool. He's 4 years old, Emery.
Okay. Now, you said you went to Michigan State.
I did, right.
Okay.
So when I left, graduated from Flint Central, went right to Michigan State, and that's where I really learned what it was like and the power that you could have as a community organizer. I was one of the first classes of Michigan's AmeriCorps, which is like the domestic Peace Corps program. And for 2 years, I was a student at Michigan State during the days, and on evenings and weekends, I rode into Lansing's neighborhood, and we were part of neighborhood action teams that planted trees and flower beds and cleaned up alleyways, and really saw from a neighborhood level what it's like to change how government works, change the direction that the city's going. At that time, Mayor David Hollister was in office in Lansing, credited for the turnaround there. He's now actually consulting for the city of Flint. So he's doing that part of it, but I really learned through that AmeriCorps experience right there in North Lansing what it takes to bring a community together and turn the city around.
Okay. So that is where your public service started. That's where the heart of that started when you decided.
Yeah, that's where I learned you could do public service as a career. Okay. Because I was one of those students, one of those high school students who was always involved with Salem Housing on the Saturday weekends and Operation Brush Up and volunteering and being at the church and being a part of youth programs. So I was always doing that volunteer work. But it was that experience as a community organizer that taught me how you can do this in a powerful way. You can serve people, but you can also change neighborhoods. You can change communities.
Okay, certainly. Now, you were defeated by a very small margin in this last election, 2%. It's really small.
581 votes.
Yeah, when you're talking about a city size event, that's a very small margin. What do you think that you need to do differently this time to take you to that next level?
We're doing more with our volunteers. And just like I had that experience through the AmeriCorps program and working in a neighborhood, now I'm bringing that experience right into my own campaign. And I had also served the last 5 weeks right here in the Flint headquarters on the Obama campaign. And I saw how powerful people who were volunteers and had passion, what they could do in their own communities and neighborhoods. So I'm in the process of building 9 neighborhood volunteer teams. And we have trainings every 2 weeks at the YMCA. People are learning how to organize in their own communities. And that way, right from the beginning of this campaign, we have people activated in every part of the city. And that's, I feel really proud of our work in that area because it's it is such a big city. We think about it takes 10 minutes to drive across the city of Flint, right? But if you get out and you walk those blocks, you realize that this is a big community. There are a lot of different neighborhoods. People have different perspectives. So these neighborhood teams, they're leading this campaign. I'm the candidate, but it's about these teams.
Now, what do you do currently? What is your current occupation?
I own and manage a consulting company called 21st Century Performance, and I'm working with some of Flint's nonprofit organizations as well as a network out of Detroit called State Voices Center for Civic Participation. And it's the same message of what people and volunteers and activists can do to change the direction of their communities. Right now, we're part of, in that State Voices project, I'm leading the coordination with some of the other big national organizations, like the NAACP and the Sierra Club, that want to support President Obama's transformative federal initiatives on health care, on clean energy, this first budget that he's working on now. We're putting together the coalitions in every state that are going to pressure the representatives in Washington so that at home we get that federal health care reform.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you returned to Flint from Washington, D.C.
From Minneapolis.
From Minneapolis,
Right.
okay.
I lived in both D.C. and Minneapolis
I
after
see.
graduate school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I'm familiar with your D.C. work.
Right.
You were working as an urban development coordinator, is that correct? Is that the title?
It was the Office of Grants and Partnerships.
Okay.
Right.
But the demographic area was much like that of Flint. What experience doing that work do you feel is going to complement you in this administration if you were to win?
Right. And I was one of the people who was working with Mayor Tony Williams.
Oh.
And it's a large executive office. As you pointed out, it's a bigger city. A lot of the same problems that DC had in the 90s and going into the 21st century, we're now experiencing now in Flint in 2008, 2009. But the magic of the work in DC, how government really changed, was we went out to the people and created a citywide strategic plan. And every neighborhood had a comprehensive development plan. And in our executive office, we had a list, 1 through 100, 1 through 400, of all the things that each neighborhood wanted to change. And every city agency was accountable for some of those programs. And when there was a gap between what the city could offer because of the financial situation, then our Office of Partnerships and Grants, we had to go to work to find those dollars. So we brought in 20 million, 30 million, 40 million a year. Again, a much bigger city. But if we do that in Flint on a smaller scale, we can really change our schools, our neighborhoods, we can attract new companies. So I did that work right in the Office of Partnerships and Grants in DC.
Okay. Now, Donald Williamson appointed Mike Brown as the interim mayor until we get through these elections. In his short time, how do you think he's done?
Yeah. It's hard to say being on the outside.
Okay.
I mean, as closely as I try to follow this, I know a lot of your listeners pay real close attention to what's happening at City Hall and what decisions he's making. It is such a terrible financial mess. And I said this 2 years ago, that we were headed for a 15, a 20, a $30 million deficit. And if you add up the lawsuits and the different funds, the $14 million out of the general fund, that's just the tip of the iceberg. So I hear that he's starting to have the conversations with the unions, with different department heads about what they can change, how they can save money but still deliver services. It's going to take some time before we have much of an idea. I'll tell you one thing though, he made this comment about potentially shrinking the city, and I am absolutely against that. The way you build community and neighborhoods is to put together a plan and raise the money and work with the people who have lived there and care about that place. You don't send this message from City Hall that some neighborhoods may stay and some may go. So I don't know what all he meant by that, but that's something that I wanted to mention because it's so different than my own view.
Right. Now, we spoke about the deficit in his State of the City address.
Yeah.
He laid out that there will be at least a $14 million deficit going up into $30 million with the possible lawsuits.
Right.
We know if you're elected, there will be some difficult choices that will have to be made. Would you be willing to commit on this show what you will not cut? What is most important to you? What won't you cut facing these hard economic times?
I've been thinking about it differently than that. Let me see if I can get back around to your question, because one of the things that I will do differently is I will not appoint the full number of mayoral appointees that the charter lays out. I mean, that's one of the top ways that we can save money, is we need to support the people who are actually doing the work, providing the services. I went over and met the men and women who go out in the garbage trucks this past morning, and I found out how they run their routes, how they think they could save the city some money. So my commitment is to go and talk